Hello and welcome. I am your host of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Author Karen E. Osborne. I have 5 novels out. The latest is Justice for Emerson. I am so glad that you're here. This is a space for readers and writers to come together and talk about books. I met our guest about a year ago, and I'm just so delighted. It is always so fun when I've met the authors before and I know a little bit about them and I know a little bit about their style and their books. And so I'm so happy to have Rebecca Inch-Partridge back, on our show, back in my life and on this show. Hey, Rebecca.
Hi, it's good to be here. Thank you so much. I have to say, I'm really honored. I watched the interview you did with Paul Boyington and was so inspired. And that's a little bit of what made me think about today's interview in a little different light than just talking about the nuts and bolts of my books.
Cool. I'll let Paul know that you inspired him, that he inspired you. So let me tell you a little bit about Rebecca, and then she'll tell you all about herself. So she started writing stories for the say the name of the world,
It's Paraxis Cluster. Yeah.
Roxas Star Cluster, when she was in high school and never stopped. She loves telling stories about people doing the right thing when it's hard or even deadly. After years of working in human services, she now loves being an author, an editor, an author manager, a writing instructor. Oh my goodness. And a full-time science fiction fan. She's a frequent panelist at science fiction conventions. She lives in the San Francisco Bay Area, and she lives with her husband, their dog, McCracken, 2 cats, 4 chickens, and 1 turkey, which her 2-year-old grandson loves to pet. I'm glad that you're meeting Rebecca now and that you hear how interesting she is. So today we have 3 things to talk about today. 2 of your books and your business. So we should
Yes.
get rolling. So tell us first about escaping, and I can see it over your shoulder, escaping the Dashia. What's that
Yeah.
about?
Escaping the Dashia is set in a Star Wars style universe, so there's all those different aliens. But the central character, Twyla, is a hybrid who may look like a human being, but she has a telepathic ability. And so she's on hiding on Earth because her mother is a group known as Dashia that use that ability to be like psychic vampires. And they run the mob and she expects Twyla to take her place in the family business. And so when she is kidnapped and brought back to the Praxis cluster, Twyla refuses, and bad things happen, and she has to make a lot of hard decisions and stand her ground, and chaos ensues. And so that's basically the premise of the book and why it's called Escaping the Dashia, because she's not just trying to escape her mother, she's trying to escape becoming a psychic vampire. And
Wow. So what's the world
yeah,
like? I'm always so impressed with world building. Just give us a little thumbnail of what the world is like that you created as a teenager and still live in.
well, I was the age of this protagonist, 15, when I first started building it. And there are 16 different races. There are evolved beings based on human, based on earth animals. So there's evolved felines that are humanoid. There's evolved lizard races. There's evolved tree people like ants. There's just all these different categories. There's evolved bird people, the cyan, that in this book is everybody's favorites. Well, no, the Katians have a cat attitude, so it's a tough second. And so each world that's a home world has a different culture, history, religion, society. And now, of course, this is got a empire type, trying to control it with just too many different disparate backgrounds. And so it is hard to keep things under control. And
Wow.
so here she is, this minute person trying to do the right thing under really bad circumstances, even though it costs her and her loved ones. And so, even though you wouldn't think there's any similarities between it and my paranormal mystery, everything I write always has a strong female protagonist trying to do the right thing, even if it costs them dearly. That's the
Yeah.
thread.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about your strong female protagonist. What are some of her qualities? What are some of her traits? What are some of her shortcomings?
So she's stubborn beyond belief because she had to be up until 5 years old when she was smuggled out and her mom was abusing her. And so she learned just to put up these mental barriers and never really learned to drop them. So her strongest strength also is her biggest weakness. And learning when to drop that is the struggle of this book. Can she learn to love? And if she does, is that actually going to destroy her and that other person? And so that conundrum of you can have a strength also be your weakness and your weakness be your strength. So
Isn't that true with us? That our
yes,
greatest strength is often when overused, our greatest weakness. That's such a that's such a human,
well,
unfortunately,
and
foible.
and when your other strengths go underdeveloped because you've used this one coping mechanism, and she is me thinly disguised, or who I had as my imaginary friend in high school, and writing it again as a mature mother of a 15-year-old. That's when I picked it back up and wrote a draft that's similar to what came out. It was amazing seeing who I was back then and seeing life through the lens of a 15-year-old. And, I'm really grateful to my son that he said, this is a young adult novel, because I always just thought it was straight up science fiction.
It's really a young adult novel.
It
But
is.
I find that a lot of adults enjoy young adult novels.
40% of the young adult market is read by people over 40. So 40-40.
There you go. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So you've been in this business for a long time. I want to talk about Abby's Fire in a minute. But before then, I want to ask you about how things have changed in the fantasy world because it was dominated by men, right? When you first started. What's
Yeah.
what's what's changed?
So first of all, you'll notice my name is Rebecca. When I first started pitching it, they said, "Oh, so what name would you publish under?" And I went, "I'm sorry, I don't understand." Well, you can't have a feminine name on a science fiction book.
Hmm.
And that was just a given. I was raised, matter of fact, the hat I am wearing is my grandfather's because he was into science fiction. He passed that love on to me and my mother. And we read a lot of C.J. Sherritt, who was a female writer that nobody knew was female because she wrote under her initials C.J. because nobody would buy her if they knew it was a woman. And that was just a given 20 some years ago. And now that is not the case, thanks to many breakthrough writers. And so
Yeah,
when
so
I was able to,
many.
yes, and science fiction has led to, and the increase in science fiction authors that are women, and the huge market of science fiction readers that are women, which the publishing industry went, oh, we're missing out on 50% of the readers. We should capture that. Has led to more women in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, because you have to read about it and inspire to it when you are young in order to seek it out. Star Trek really inspired a next generation of a lot of scientists. And so, my hope is to keep that ball rolling.
Yeah, yeah, that makes so much sense. So let's switch now to Abby's Fire and just briefly tell us about Abby's Fire. Now, you co-wrote this.
So Abby's Fire originally was written by my aunt, and she didn't tell anybody she wrote. She was a closet writer, and she found out I was editing, and she asked me if I would just read this thing that she had written before she decided if she should just throw it out because she'd gotten 6 rejections from publishers.
Only 6?
6. And 3 of them were personalized rejections with notes. Now, she didn't understand that those notes, because they did not say, please submit it again, were actual and unspoken thing. We'd like to see it again.
Yeah.
And I read it and I fell in love with this character who ended up burned in a fire trying to save her sons. And then her husband leaves her, the kids are gone, and she has to try to rebuild her life. So she goes back to small time Iowa after living in California, stays with her sister, and decides to rehab her sister's rental property. It happens to be haunted. And she doesn't even mind that it's haunted. And she sees these ghosts in the mirror, and she learns about the murder of this mother and her children. And so she decides to turn amateur sleuth, thinking, well, it's in the 60s. I just want to right this wrong and close this case so that they can have peace. And well, it turns out there are people who still care, and chaos ensues. Another threat of mine. And so it was fun doing speculative fiction, because it is still speculative fiction, but was so different than science fantasy. And we had a wonderful time, and it was just a blast because these weren't my people. This wasn't my world building. And I started off just as the editor, and it clicked. We just had such a great time working together that the energy, a really good writing group will do this. Mm-hmm. And when I'm working with a client, the give and take is really wonderful as an editor. It'll happen. There'll be that synergy. And so we just fell in love with working together. And so
beautiful. That's beautiful, beautiful. So that's a great segue. Tell us just briefly about your business.
Oh, so I have been critiquing manuscripts for 25 years because I really can't function outside of a writer's group. And pretty soon, the critiquing was taking up so much time, I couldn't do any of my own writing. And I finally started saying, look, if it's outside of this critique group, if you want this much more, I'm going to have to start charging. And I was shocked. People were like perfectly happy to. And so when it came time that medically I couldn't work a 9-to-5 job anymore, let alone as a social worker or an activities director in a senior community, which is what I used to do, editing was the perfect flexible job. And I built up a clientele and fell into editing, and then they wouldn't go with me. They wanted help with figuring out how to submit, how to do the first part of trying to get the book out there. So I ended up as a coach. I ended up as an author manager. And it is amazing to see somebody's lump of coal that they come to me with going, I don't know what to do with this. I just don't know. And they're so frustrated. And to see the light in their eyes when they come out with a product and it ends up published. So Frank Neeson's Fortune's Call and Joan Griffin's Force of Nature.
Which is doing fabulously.
Yes,
it's a wonderful book. And she's
Black Rose Riser's #1 audiobook sale, and she has hit #1 on ebook. I mean, she's done.
She's just doing
she had this little niche book that was going to sell a few copies. And I get vicariously to enjoy all that. And so it's really wonderful to do that. And if it's one piece of advice that I could really give aspiring authors, and this is going to hurt a few feelings, so stand by. Don't publish your first draft. You're so in a hurry to get it out there on Amazon and to self-publish because it's so quick and so accessible, and you feel like you've been in labor. You know, I'm a brand new grandma, so I've been through this with my daughter-in-law. And instead of 9 months, you've been carrying this baby around with you for a couple years, and you've got this draft done, and it looks good to you, but you haven't taken the steps necessary to have some other eyes on it and to bring it up to a professional level. And you put it out there into the world, and it's a first draft, and it really has harmed so many writers in the long run. Just don't publish your
Absolutely.
first draft. Just don't do it.
Yeah,
The temptation is
absolutely.
great, but
That's
I
that's great. That's really great advice. We have lots of writers who watch. So this show is What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? We only have time for one or two recommendations. Is there something that you've read recently that you'd like to recommend?
yeah. So I made sure to have it up on the shelf for young adult. Any of the Tamara Pierce books. She does world building like you could not believe. She is just awesome. For adults, if you have not explored the world of urban fantasy, it's almost magic realism. It's where it's taking place in the here and now, so you feel grounded, and then it adds one supernatural element. And in this case, he happens to be a wizard working as a detective. And The Harry Dresden by Jim Butcher, the narrative voice, it's so easy for non science fiction readers and fantasy readers to enjoy. It's a great bridge. It's my gateway drug to get readers into science fiction. I give them Tamara Pierce, I give them Jim Butcher, and pretty soon I've got them into my science fiction world.
That is excellent. So the audience is now totally charmed by you, as I am, and as I was the first time I met you. Please tell them how they can find you. Where can they? No, first of all, you can find all of her books everywhere you buy books. And if it's not on the shelf, ask for it. And same thing with
Yes.
libraries. But where can they be in touch with you and find out more about you?
So my website is nice and easy. It's ripartridge.com because spelling out Rebecca Inch-Partridge would be difficult. So ripartridge.com. And that carries over to my social media on Facebook. And you can just look at Rebecca Inch-Partridge author and find me on Facebook. And I love to chit chat with readers and get in touch. And writers who have questions about editors, I'm happy to answer those just because you don't want to get connected to a bad editor. And usually I'll send them to the Editor Freelance Association's website. I am a member of that so that they at least have good info. But yeah, just get a hold of me at ripartridge.com.
Excellent, excellent. And I hope that when you do, that you will let Rebecca know that you met her on What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Thank you so much for joining Rebecca and me. We're so glad that you are here. And I'll see you next week in the next episode. Have a great week, everybody. Bye bye.
Bye.